What do you know? Not gonna be working. They without a job.
Yes. Donna, she did. All right. To the table.
Last time I heard, 1,400.
Great. Afternoon, everyone. It's 4 o'clock and it's time for all the commissioner work session. Thank all those who have joined us here today. Elizabeth, can you call the roll?
Mayor Harkin.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Cooper.
Here.
Commissioner Oliver.
Here.
Commissioner Spiegel. Commissioner Liverpool.
Commissioner Gilligan will not be joining us today, so we'll just have to excuse her from the meeting. So before we approve the agenda, the April 14th meeting, we had approved a resolution for pump number 7. So since then, the state has requested some changes and updates to the language. So I would like to amend the agenda to add that to be number 5 under items for discussion and consideration. The staff will go ahead and review what those updates are. So get a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So move.
A motion on the floor, all questions, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed have the same right. Now we're gonna move on to the most important topic of the day, the FY 2026 budget overview. Matt, welcome.
Thank you.
You got good news for us?
Oh, absolutely. Great news. It's a beautiful thing.
Oh, very good, very good.
So I believe we're going to tag team the budget, if that's okay.
Very
So being on the job of host, is today my 7th full day.
Oh,
I
you're
may
seasoned.
not have everything memorized.
So, season now.
But he's doing really well.
Yes, I'm going.
Like me to begin on the various high levels and any granular detail that we can jump into. So if that's okay. We have a couple of handouts that you should have in front of you. There's a pictorial image of 3 coffee cups. There's a singular page that's identified as budget details. There's a page that says what will be funded in FY 26. And then there's a multi-page document that you should have that has a staple at the top left. And this multi-page document, and I'd like to give credit to Manager Clark, this is based off of what Todd has presented in the past. So I try to keep a similar format. The major conversation that needs to be had here tonight is to seek input and guidance from the board as to a direction put together to finalize a draft budget. Being that it is a revaluation year and period, we were all present when the county provided their independent contractor to come in and share with us the changes in tax value valuation. So I think the best place to start would be your budget details, singular page that's running left to right horizontal. So if you want to grab that document, we can begin there. This is keeping us above the flight deck at 100+ thousand feet, showing in the snapshot your current budget that we're operating under today, and what the proposed snapshot of the new budget would be effective July 1st of 2025 through June 30th of 2026. So our real property number is the target that's moving continuously. So right now the reval occurred, and as a reminder, the reval is a snapshot in time of January 1st of 2025, where all our properties received a revaluation. So you're showing an existing or previous budget of 1.1 billion, now a proposed 1.97 billion. And with the jump of that nature, you're trying to determine statutorily, we need to provide the residents and constituents, voters with a revenue neutral tax rate. And that's what Christy and I are working on. She's done a great job of trying to back out all the growth, grab all the data. So we want to give thanks to the planning department who's captured all the growth and helped us with those numbers since the last reval period to today. So we've seen a massive amount of improvements, whether it be new construction, renovation, and the like. And with all of that growth, you can back that data out, which means if you didn't have a reval, you'd still be adding to the scroll. So does that make sense that that new growth is considered positive growth? So when you see that $1.97 billion value, that value is up for appeal. And so somebody at the table can correct me. I know it's early May, or what is our deadline for appeal? May 2nd. So we're quickly coming on this week on Friday. So then there would be the process of the county working through all those appeals, whether it be at the staff level or through arbitrary cases. And we don't anticipate that to be fully finalized until I'm assuming the August period. If that's the best info I have, is that accurate? that's the assumptions that we're working under. So we have to do our very best, put together a budget that's gonna be balanced, accurate, and then serve the needs of the community for the next level. So there is discrepancies, the moving target of what that actual readjusted new real value will be. So when you come down, what we're showing you is real value and then a revenue neutral rate. The calculated revenue neutral rate is nearly 31 cents. So the current value is 46 cents. The proposed revenue neutral would be 30.8 cents. Any questions on how we arose at 30.8?
Matt, is that with the current 1.97 billion? So if that changes, and you said probably by August, that number would change as well.
Yes, ma'am.
And
So like
then
a teeter totter, if the 1.97 comes down, the revenue neutral would come up to keep you at the same gross tax.
Thank you.
So what the staff has done is put together a draft budget that they're working through, capturing reoccurring costs, fixed costs, improvements, and that budget to balance would be proposed to be set at 33 cents. So that is just shy or just above a 2 penny increase over the revenue neutral rate, and we wanted to work through and talk about that. So previously 1 cent generated 123 cents, the new 1 penny would generate north of 200. The current value would be approximately $209,000, which explains why we would have to bring down the tax rate to collect the same amount. So what we're proposing is if there's a 2 penny adjustment to the tax rate, it's roughly $400,000, and that $400,000 would be needed to fund certain specific items. We'll go over that in greater detail. Things that I think are critical, we talk about the numbers of employees. The current budget shows 84 full-time employees. The proposed or the working draft shows roughly 92. And inside of those positions, there's fire, we would answer all the other locations. And then no position budgeted for IT, so that's actually a decreased position. Next under the line, you'll see the power bill. What's important about power bill is your power bill generated from gas tax can only be used for roadway improvements and transportation on town-owned and maintained or operated streets. That power bill number is still floating right around 180,000, so it's currently estimated at 178.
I'm sorry, Matt, but you did, with me with the IT, are we gonna be able to discuss that?
Discuss anything, absolutely.
Is there any reason why we're not gonna hire an IT? We had one before, and I think it's crucial that we have one now.
So I think the conversation, if we want to pause there to talk about IT, would be what's the most efficient in operation? I think right now we're utilizing subcontracted service on a contract. And then we have placement of IT here. I think it is currently just one gentleman, 1 day a week, which we have down on Mondays. And we're utilizing ACS to serve the community currently.
So that contract person, we have him 1 day a week here on site, here on site.
And then they're on demand. So for example, in my first week when I had questions, I notified Stefan and he was very responsive. Would help set up the terminals. I had a question, I made a phone call in and he was available. So I think we're on primary person 1 day out of 5 per week, and then on-demand services is needed to control the problem.
And not taking nothing away from staff such as Rachel and Elizabeth, when we run into a glitch during a board meeting, and that was there, and we need an IT person, they're not available. That contract person is not available, he's not on site.
I was present.
And we do have running glitches
He is on site.
for our meeting. Will he be on site for our meeting?
He has been, yes, sir.
And I was present at the planning board meeting last Monday. He was outside the planning board meeting.
Yes, sir. That was the ask from ACS, with Stefan with ACS, is that we have an on-site person to live stream the meetings from the Board of Commissioners side, the planning board meeting, and your regular meeting, and to have some more on-site one-on-one help for employees when they have issues on site.
So the expectation is they have somebody on site for all of our live stream meetings.
Currently, that's yes.
I wouldn't deviate from that. I think that's a bare minimum of the ask would be not that, make sure you physically have a person here. it's Murphy's Law. If they're not here, I think we might have more problems than they do.
Of course, yeah, I just wanna make sure that, you know, that when you're in that boardroom over there, if you got running the glitches in that, you would be able to handle. So if that person is gonna be there, that's fine.
And he was here last Monday, and there were those glitches when there was a transfer of presentation and data from a public member that was presenting versus when staff was here, so he was working through this.
He's not the young man that sits there beside Rachel on the meeting night. Is that the IT person?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead on the list.
Well, okay.
I'll keep my eye on it. Any other questions about those positions?
I'm fine, I'm good. Unless someone else has a question on that?
I assume we're gonna go over that later when we get to.
You can get as granular as you wanted to start. Continuing down on Powell bill, just want to remind everybody that that Powell bill number is right at 178,000. That number will remain static. And then you can see your general fund numbers for general fund budget versus the proposed staff is actually a decrease number. And then utility fund, you'll see it's relatively the same. There's a couple of changes in utilities that will go to stormwater fund, major changes there. And then that gives you a total budgetary number of the current budget at 21.4, almost 21.5 million versus a proposed of 20.6 million. And we want to remind the board that you had the 1.5 million budgeted, which was previously dedicated to asphalt road paving, which was a shift in the budget cycle for purchase agreement. There's the major differentiator. That's the one-time cost that you would want to back on. So if you back out the 1.5 million, we're looking at a balanced budget with a 33 cent tax rate is what is being proposed by staff. If you want, we can go to the next singular page, which I believe is the what will be funded conversation.
Before you, if you want to review each page, if you go,
Probably have our memories together.
Yeah, question. If you would like to answer any questions that you have.
a couple things on 24, 25. Shown in 24. The audit showed 1,265,000. Page 80, and I have a letter from county office that showed $1,124,000. So I was saying, I think it's the 1.11 number is recent review.
Commissioner Oliver, I used we will take a look at it, but I had pulled numbers from the spreadsheet from the budget for that.
That's it. I'm just trying to point things I think we need to review before we move forward. That's one of them. I'll also share with you under the 25, 26 snapshot number that I have a letter from the county public officer that shows at that date, and I think it's probably changed and will continue to change, but at that date, they showed the current at 2,134,000.
Well, and what was the date that you had that number?
April 3rd, 25. Couple weeks ago.
And what was that number you received, Bucky? Can you repeat that number again?
2.134, 2 bit for the next year, as of April 3rd, the valuation, total valuation within Beaufort for real property only was 2,134,000,000. And again, the only reason I want to get those accurate is because obviously they control what the revenue neutral math is. I've also put in a request this morning for an update on it, but I think you should do that, Christie, frankly, before we start our budget meetings, maybe about sometime in mid-May, because I know it's changing.
Yes, the last communication that I had from the county was they are trying to send those out right at the end of the month, or send an update at the end of the first. So I would anticipate we should be receiving another update.
Right. I spent a lot of time in the courthouse, and Danny Palmer, who was here, was extremely helpful. Everybody, all the consultants I found to be helpful. Number of people that I've talked to about this have had meetings with them, had them very quickly come up and actually change the numbers. You can go on the GIS and see where your numbers change, so, they've been extremely responsive, in my opinion.
Now, when will the drop dead date be for knowing when that number will be solved?
August.
August?
After you're about.
Danny said it'd be August before they expected it from the state. But I think we're gonna have a problem. I've got a comment later on that. We're gonna have a problem, I think, because I think we're gonna still see some shrinkage from whatever number they put out at the end of May. Because there've been relatively few appeals. So I think we have to be realistic on that and at least either reserve it or put in enough flex factor to not be disappointed at the end of the year. I've got to get to that specific recommendation.
Any further questions on the budget detail page? Carry on.
If you're okay with it, we can go to the general list of what would be funded now. These are the high level, things what we would refer to as bigger ticket items. And then that will give you a much better view of what potentially could be funded in the proposed draft. Beginning in the general fund, it's 6 new full-time firefighters, and that estimated cost with all the gear, full-time benefits, potential that would be associated with funding of the rated $600,000. 3 of those firefighters would man or person in single shift at station 1. The other 3 persons would man a shift at station 2. The percentage of this, half of it, would theoretically be coming from the county's tax collection and the fire district. Any questions on those positions?
So this would only be 300,000, or there would be an additional?
So you have to grab 600,000, but it would go as a revenue that's going to be coming in from the fire district. So what we're saying is if you add these 6 human beings, it would put a singular person on each shift at each, or a single shift on at station 1 and station 2 is still 600.
Can you speak to the need and necessity of adding those firefighters and what you look at?
I can gladly do it, but I would also ask Tony if he's willing to.
Sure.
Please,
Yes, sir. Just a little clarification on the 600,000, that's first year cost. We have the stand-up cost of additionally with 2 sets of bunker gear, radios and everything in the first year. Second year, that would drop, and drop somewhat depending on where we were in the second year. Justification from what we've seen on levels of service, I'll drop back to last year, coming into the calendar year. We were up 200 calls from the year prior. We had a nursing home and we had the growth that we were experiencing in Beaufort. That call volume was up. This year, right now, we're tracking to be 200 over that. So basically, just in call loads, we're looking at 400 extra calls. So the level of service in the town of Beaufort, number of firefighters in the town has not changed since I've been here in almost 6 years. So as far as the service change, we actually have less firefighters at station 1 than we did. So asking half the county to take care of its share for the 6 firefighters, that puts 3 coming from that side, and we're headed to that budget. We finish here, county tonight. So that's the best justification I'm gonna give you. We could go into overlapping calls, and when we have calls and fight with each other, that right there, the way the growth is showing, we definitely need a level of service.
Can you speak to the amount of time that may like hold up for, as far as by adding these new firefighters? How many years do you think we would have to go, or what kind of numbers are we going to have to see before we bump up? Do we have a projection on that so we have an understanding and kind of plan for that in years to come?
Right now, and when I use the numbers that we're using, we're looking at our slow season right now. So as we see it go up through the year, I'm not gonna say we wouldn't be back here next year asking for 3 more station units. Our goal is by NFPA standard, which this is just standard across the country, is putting 3 firefighters on each truck. Right now, we're riding 2 on each truck. So we have 3 frontline pieces of equipment with engine 1, engine 2, and ladder 1. So I would be remiss in not saying I see a potential to be back here next year asking for 3, but that's a request. The first generation, I did ask for 9, but being right inside what we're trying to do with the town and do with our budget going forward, we went back to 3 for the town. So in our request, if we see a significant rise in call volume with the building that we see, and we see people want to live in Beaufort, yes, there is potential we could be back shortly asking.
Chief,
Yes, sir.
does that, in terms of the fire rating, the number of men that are less on that truck?
Commissioner, when we look at our ratings inspections, which we come up in 2026, we come back up for ratings and inspection. With that helps set insurance. Primarily now, last time we lowered ourselves to a class 4, which on a commercial aspect, that has a lot of impact. Residential, as long as you stay less than a 6 or less than, it's not going to affect it. Where it does start to affect us is manpower, or that's the way it's put, nothing intended. But when we look at workforce showing up on the scene, we do have numbers we have to hit a certain amount of time. Right now, we depend on Moorhead County, we depend on Harper's Island, Atlantic Beach. We all depend, so if they're called up on the scene and they catch us in the right situation during inspection, it could grossly affect us. Yes,
So
sir.
that's what I'm trying to get.
Yes, sir, it could grossly affect us. Right now, we probably hit us mostly in our commercial aspect, commercial insurance rates as established. If they got bad enough to affect the residential,
Thanks.
Any further questions about the positions?
The next line item would show the new addition of a Parks and Recreation Events Coordinator. That estimated cost would be $72,000. Any questions about Parks and Recreation? That includes benefits.
I do have a, comment about that. First of all, I want to say thank you. I know that's something that I personally have been asking for, I think, for over a year now, so I'm very happy to see that. I had talked before about the possibility of making this position sort of a joint Parks and Rec and sustainability position. It's not uncommon for a town like ours to not have any staff in the resilience sustainability. That I understand that. But larger cities do, and we're starting to see the need, I think, for that in Beaufort with our resilience planning, applying for resilience grants, the interest from the town, how we're planning for the future. I would very much like to see this position be Parks and Rec with also, and I don't know how you, if you want to do it 50-50, with a sustainability aspect and resilience planning specifically focused on coastal resilience planning. I had shared some example job descriptions that had some of those job duties and expectations. I'm happy to share those again. If y'all came back to me and said, you know, that I just don't think that that's possible, then we could rediscuss. But I think that there could be overlap with these job responsibilities in person. And let's be honest, we're in a job market right now where a lot of people are going to be looking for jobs. And I do think you could find the right person that would have background involved. Now, I could be wrong because I haven't posted the job, but I do think something to consider.
Any thoughts on the board?
Well, one perhaps requesting Parks and Rec events coordinator. We have already a list of things that we do understand that person's going to do. It would require full-time work. So to acquire someone like that to then fill that amount of duties, if the staff is recommending just that, I would lean on the staff to understand duties that need to be done, the amount of time that's going to take. If we're going to actually truly run that position, make that position truly work properly and fulfill its duties.
currently exists, and I'm looking over it, right? As we met about it and had a very lengthy conversation about what we're currently doing today versus what you would want us to be doing tomorrow. So there's, the best way to explain it, there's many plates spinning and we're spinning them all. We don't want any of them to fall, but there's also an opportunity, the information I have is the desire to enhance public services in parks and recreation. Is that a correct and fair statement? To do that, something else, one day you have to stop, or 2 plates, or 10 plates, you have to stop spinning if you want direction. So we have a list, we would gladly be able to provide that list at a future workshop session, which I think would be apropos, and work through to answer what would be best utilized on time and space for that human being. I think the board would want to give clear direction to the staff as to where we want to go with parks and recreation in a year or 2 or 3 ahead. That will also help you refine what you're going to need in that person's skills to get to those goals.
And part of, I hear what you're saying, part of it, and I've, seen this for the past year or so, that I do think the Parks and Rec position, part of that is applying for grants, right? And a lot of this is open space, right, green space, and so having that background of understanding, yes, Parks and Rec is very important, but also where we live on the coast and understanding a lot of the grant applications now and how you integrate all of these things. You need a sustainability background, a resilience background. So maybe that's not the focus, but I would really like to see somebody with that background, if possible. Or have some skills in that area.
If you were to position that to me, because this is the first conversation we've had, I would tend to lean on resiliency to potentially somebody training up in the planning silo. Within that area would be where I would think that office would potentially be a best fit, or could have been best management house, or even in the manager, assistant managerial office, because if you have general oversight for sustainability, empowerment, inclusion, those things that are starting to peaking at the top down. So that is not something I would be opposed to studying greater and adding to my wheelhouse as well. I don't know if I can speak for Elizabeth, but as you're traveling down those class flows, that's a specific style. Having been a parks director in that green space, they tend to focus on other things, I think. So we can definitely look at all those choices, but bringing it up and presenting it at the next meeting or the next opportunity, I think we're ready to share that.
I think that's great.
It's a good start.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I do want to say one more thing. I know, but I think we kind of skipped over this, that this is also because we understand we need a full-time PIO officer, public information officer. And
That's where we need to split this, yeah.
And I very much support that, Rachel. You've been doing a great job, and we know that that is a full-time job. So I do want to back up and say, I'm very happy to see that, and I know that will result in the town being able to have a full-time PIO officer.
And if we have that conversation, I think that would be part of our presentation. If we're producing X amount of widgets today, will we produce more in communication with a full-time parks person? The answer is absolutely yes. What does that look like? If we're producing Y amount of widgets in programming, what does that full-time person encompass going forward? But I also want to share with you, just adding a human being and providing that person with office space won't get the deliverable. So if you add parks and recreation, you need to caveat and budget for what you want that person to execute. And that is a buildable block over time. So we want to set expectations. That would be a good conversation. But yes, ma'am, thanks. Because you can only do so much if you're supposed to be working 40 and you might have worked 6 straight and you were running the Saturday cleanup and make sure everything went okay. And all everybody knows is it went smooth like butter on toast.
Yeah.
But they may not know the 15 other things you could have done this week that you had another 10 hours.
But I do think we didn't support this request, this specific job description.
Yes, sir. I believe we have those already drafted and we'll be glad to share them. But I think an actionable item for us is to do a deeper dive and more of an expanse on that parks and recreation / how we would enhance public communication if funded. I capture that correct.
And I would say, I'm not conditioning upon this, but I'd also sources of revenue to offset some of these costs on that also. We ask,
Rental facilities, use of space, things like that.
whatever you could think of,
Big
appropriately,
Parks and recreation space.
whatever, whatever's appropriate.
Under,
Can you bring back the cakewalk?
There you I'm gonna make a couple of.
It's just another thing.
The next item, I can't speak to as intently or, potentially Ms. Barber, or even Elizabeth, for one. We were talking through the salary study adjustments, the finance, the selection is the $113,000 option would roll up what the board had been presented and move forward, is that correct?
Yes, that was one of the years of service options.
So if you have any direct questions, any of us are willing to work through that with you, but we're including
So
the years.
are we saying then that out of that study, there was specific board action to go with years of service and not just, not the blend? Is that the conclusion out of that meeting?
No, sir, I wouldn't say there was board action. We put the higher, a little bit higher cost plan in, just so we could back that out easier, if you decided to go with the.
Or has Matt had an opportunity to review the data to come up with a recommendation as between the two proposals that were made by the consultant?
I've sat with Ms. Barber and worked through it. I can't say to you that I've had enough time this week to comfortably give you a recommendation.
Adjustment.
I would ask if there's any feedback from the board. I'll gladly review it and give you a singular professional recommendation.
I think we received it with open arms and we're quite well behind it, but there were some different alternates. I don't think this board reached a specific decision on what, but I think we were favorably impressed by the professionalism and completeness of the report.
So
Am I overspeaking?
before we advance, do you mind if I ask Ms. Barber? Ms. Barber, do you have any input as to why that would be our best selection, or do you have advice on any other choice?
Because when we looked at it overall, we felt like it was, a better solution if we went with the option that compared the years of service as opposed to the years of service and the time in the position. He actually gave us five different options. And so out of that, we looked at the two that were in the middle. And the way it looked with the option that we selected, there were 34 employees that would be affected by the changes that he has recommended. And so looking at our complete workforce, we felt like that was the better selection to be, fair and comparable to all of our employees.
Maybe Matt had time to review it from his experience. It's about a $15,000 split. I'm not judging either one. I just think that you should have the opportunity to review the report and come up with recommendations.
And everyone is.
You're the one that has to hang to the budget.
I want to point out though that everybody's provided that data, just haven't had a chance to go through everything. We had a great long conversation. If we want, we'll look at it one more time. And on my notes so far is verifying the tax rebound numbers, providing the Parks and Recreation presentation, including PIO duties and expansion. And then my third assignment would be for me to personally review the salary study data, take a much deeper dive, and then provide a final recommendation for the next step. Thank you. I may need another notebook.
We'll give you some paper.
The 3% COLA, that's okay to move on. Comparing Southeastern inflationary rate versus the COLA, so we have a space holder at 3%. Any questions about it?
Questions?
Matt, is that, and forgive me, is that generally the number, do you use 3% every year?
No, ma'am, it's been different. We usually compare, the number he just referenced, what other people in the county are doing and the inflation rate, and that's how we come up with that number. It was 4% last year.
Thank you.
So in my experience in that particular subject, if we're comparing the growth and inflationary rate in that southeastern section of the country, and we remain consistent with that, our staff numbers remain whole and don't go backwards. And so that is your baseline. So obviously, I know when I used to take a snapshot, when do you take your snapshot? We would normally take it in March, but it's irrelevant if you take it in January, February, March. It's whenever it's a year-over-year comparison, as long as you're staying consistent.
That 4%, did we base ours on Moorhead? Or looked at what Moorhead was?
I mean, we considered what they
I
were
mean-
doing, but we looked at every jurisdiction in Carter County last year and compared that.
Because they're doing some.
And the salary study also spoke to where we were more or less relatively, so there's a relative comparison to the salary study, which also, I think, brought a conclusion that we weren't grossly out of sight. So that supported the same discussion.
I mean, we are very competitive, and we want to remain competitive, not only for attracting new talent, but for retention. Anything else about that? Possibility? Moving to the UDO, it's a calibration including $150,000 into the next final stage of that UDO in the 12-month period. Any questions about that?
Is that the number that's always been there? Well, it's 100.
100 is the amount we received from the DCM grant to do the first phase, and I believe this is for the second phase.
Yes.
Is that correct?
The 100 is the grant money that we were, that's why you keep
I didn't
thinking
get
that
the second part of your sentence. You said the next phase is what's
Correct. I believe I said that.
The correct time, anything else?
So the total would have been 140. Was that not correct? Huh?
The total would be 250, but we got a $100,000 grant that covered part. Is that correct? Give or take.
Okay, it's a good thing Christie's here. So we have an amount this year, but to finish out for next year, it's 150. We didn't carry over. So it's a new number. Is that correct, Christie?
Yes, and to expand on the, we didn't carry over, sometimes we'll bring you those budget amendments in the first meeting of the new year, saying we didn't either receive these goods or we didn't complete these services, so we ask you to reappropriate them. For this particular item, we won't do that for what's left of what was appropriated this year. We did have several conversations with the consultant to make sure that we were budgeting what they felt like they would accomplish and bill in the new year, and that number was 150,000 for the next phase.
Which was actually a whole lot less than what we thought.
But is there rollover, will there be rollover at the end of this year in your opinion?
Yes, they will not bill us out completely for what we budgeted for this year.
And how much rollover will there be this year and the next year, roughly? Or if you can put it on your to-do list if you don't want to do it.
Okay. I do have a.
Just happen to have it.
I don't know how quickly, don't hold up the conversation on that, I may be looking for it, but if not, I'll.
Is that okay? You want to move the generator and come back to that since you jumped?
Okay.
Any other questions on UDO? On the police department area, there's potential replacement, plus or minus that $40,000 figure. It's currently operational and could potentially be held off if we weren't being able to fund it. But now that you've talked about it in public, the propensity of a failure in the next 12 months goes up. So that's just how these things work. But we're trying to secure all available prices, get you accurate information. If you're buying any parts that may be imported, there could be the tariff impact.
What's the replacement? How many years and how long is it?
So I can only tell you what I know my replacement cycle to be, and
How old's the generator?
I think it's about 25 years old.
About as old as I am.
Going through the cycle.
Passing cycle, right?
It was being serviced 3 or 4 years ago, and the technician said in about 3 or 4 years, you're going to run into issues with parts and service, so that's when it was put on the placeholder. Again, it's functioning well now, it's just one of, when there's a failure, what is repair potential?
Does that include automatic switch over and all that? I'm surprised you could do it for 40,000, to be honest with you.
which is why we're seeking an updated figure. I agree. Do we know the KW rate on that, by chance? Anyone?
I'm not sure of that, I'm not sure.
So I've just installed 7 and we're buttoning that up in the first quarter of this year. But the number from when they were ordered to when they hit the ground then had a dramatic inflationary figure to it. So we were fortunate to place them locked in. So that's why we're trying to check this number. In theory, this number's not gonna go away, but could go up.
The switches cost
Mhm.
as much as the generator.
It can be very
sinful.
And you wanna do it when it's not an emergency, because then an emergency drives the price up even further, so.
Most recently, I installed a new generator at Parks and Recreation facility, and it's $90,000.
I'm worried about that.
That's why we want to validate.
Go ahead.
Moving on, do we have any answers on the UV? Okay. Undercover replacement vehicle is currently set in a budget of 10. Any questions about that? That's the, it's a used vehicle, it's an incognito car, you want to change it up. You want to change it up every now and then, it's not going to be the fancy vehicles based on the reconnaissance of the work.
Does that, it doesn't include that though.
It definitely,
You can paint a different color cheap. 10,000, that must be all you can do.
trying to steer clear of the bright color yellow.
Then you blend with bright color yellow.
Fire department replacement of a 3/4 ton pickup truck, that is fully outfitted. Logo, and nothing missing.
Yes, sir.
Okay, it says 75.
Hold on. Not undercover.
And that's what we would call in this industry a right size, where currently the vehicle may be 3/4 ton, the right size unit would be, or 1 ton could be 3/4 ton, and there's potential cost savings there today.
We use fleet buying.
Yes, sir. We use state bid pricing on all rolling apparatus, but then do a comparison analysis on all of the 3. So if you had a state bid on a particular unit that's comparable, you could run a Ford, Chevrolet, Dodge, and compare it apples to apples. The Public Works forklift, probably trying to find space in the museum for the current forklift. I'm sure we can get it in the door. Is that accurate? Yes, sir. It celebrated over its 40th birthday. Life cycle was half the life of that, so it's certainly twice as good, twice as long. It's a safety issue for individuals utilizing a piece of equipment, safety gear, backup, beeper, seat belts. Then a replacement of a 1/2 ton pickup truck. You can see the cost differential between a 3/4 ton and a 1/2 ton with upfit. And again, on the previous question, that vehicle could be secured and procured with state bid pricing, have its strobe lighting already outfitted from Ford. It would come in at a lower. But then there is the replacement of a 1 ton truck, and you can see the jump in cost. It's the proper. There's also below the F-350 would be the dock replacement, grade and ball. That's if you did a complete dock replacement. There are immediate needs there. If you haven't been by the floating dock, you may want to do so, even if it's tie offs or ride on. So there's immediate needs. Whether or not we do the full replacement this year is a question on the floor and repair replacement. Questions?
Let's go back to the forklift and dump truck.
Oh, absolutely. Please, I'm sorry for going.
That's fine. Mark, is that, the purchase of that, is that gonna help, facilitate the work that is gonna be done on all the brush, the town, over the property on CBS?
Yes, and the one time,
Yeah,
the forklift is pretty much in-house, it's not used material handling and things like that.
but the one time.
The one time is,
And you haven't, got supplies and equipment involved.
Not on the vehicle, then, that's a cheap. review and review of their policy.
Because I believe the vehicle replacement plan isn't that old, we would put that together for you, is that accurate?
To managers.
There are some creative ways to look at the vehicular replacement plan, keep your fleet life younger, control your costs over time, and then decrease the amount of maintenance that you're performing. And there's transecting lines that there's a decline of value of a vehicle the second you roll it off the lot, but you have to realize we're buying items below market, and that's gonna be on the decline, and then there's an opportunity that you have to look at where those two lines transect for resale purposes, and you wanna try to turn your vehicles before they start costing you a great amount of repair, and while they're still appealed, there's an appeal to that vehicle in the open market, and then when you start that cycle, you can keep your vehicles newer, you can, if you have an average life, 8 years, for example, you can try to cut that down to 4-year median average, and when you get below that 60-month or 5-year average, that's about when not to be funny, the check engine lights start to come on, so you're losing big pieces of transmissions, radiators. So if you try to stay under that, you can cycle faster, you can show a total cost of ownership. So I'll gladly look at that vehicle replacement plan staff.
And also, when you look over the usage of guidelines also.
They replace this F-150 as well as the F-350 as they come off. What we're gonna do with them all?
Wholesale at DW's auction.
So in that particular conversation, if you are selling them sooner, you're gonna get more back. If you get more back, the total cost of ownership goes down. There has been a long-term philosophy in government that we drive the truck 15 years, but if you show the life of that half-ton pickup truck over 15 years, your cost of maintenance would have exceeded potentially replacement earlier. So if you're modeling the private practices, when you look at private stock, you'll tend to turn faster. And there's a big witching hour, you really try to be well under that 5-year market.
I understand what you're saying about the vehicle, but I understand what the citizens of both of us looking for us to do, that is to ensure that we're saving or we're spending their money very wisely and not looking at purchasing vehicles at a whim.
Absolutely, and that's why you want to show the total cost of ownership versus just the initial cost. Because if we bought a vehicle for $30,000, but then put 20,000 in it over time, and we showed it would have been less Beaufort money spent to sell it and get back 20 grand, that's where we need to be very clear, concise, that we need to do the best for the citizenry, spend the least amount of money possible, providing the highest level of service. And there's part in that conversation, whether you're emergency services or public works at 2 a.m. getting called out to a pump station repair, utilities, for example, and getting a vehicle, you gotta make sure it cracks. And so having been the person in the field that gets stranded, you start to ask, well, how do I get here? And so if we can look at the overall process, we don't want to just buy vehicles willy-nilly. We want to buy the vehicle, save it, protect it, make sure the policy is requiring oil changes and tire rotations, and make sure you're doing what you can to protect that too. And I can speak to, on the police side, that you're in that vehicle sometimes all 12 hours of your shift. That is your role in office. So safety of that person and the ability for them to respond is the truth. Absolutely. Message sent, message received. Anything else about vehicles, or we were sitting in the doctor placement?
From the doctor place.
So that's the one that Brady follows. It does look kind of sketchy, but do we have plans as to how much this is going to, we don't have any plans, we're just putting earmark in 85,000?
Mark, would you speak most eloquently?
Right now, the dock replacement that's quoted is from Carter Marine for floating dinghy dock, because we replaced some outer bands that 2 years ago, they were rotten. It's also at the same time we replaced the ferry service docks that were, my understanding, built at the same time. And we replaced those with all aluminum. It's not the main dock, it's just the floating docks.
We should probably put Denny Duck there.
Any other
Yeah.
questions? Good. Next would be the grant writer, and I can't speak to this in great detail, but I can share with you that there's been a lot of grants being produced, a lot of grants being won. So thankful to this staff for all the work that's currently underway here in the town. So obviously, we do have some skilled talent on this side of the table. Looking left and looking right, I think professionally, publicly, is right, I need to do is say thank you, especially for those that are going outside of their normal lane, putting together comprehensive documentation, technical documentation that may be above what their current knowledge base was, and they're doing a very good job of procuring it. It may also be premature to share with this board, but there is some good news as of Friday that the county had contacted us. We may have access to another $530,000 for stormwater work, and we're gonna work with the county on that. We want to thank the county, thank the folks that have reached out to us. So, obviously, it was a pretty busy week last week, and so, having a good seat at that table and keeping good grace with the county leaders is really paid off. So, what's the impetus of the grant writer, and who would most eloquently speak to that from the staff level to answer any questions?
Well, I can start. We did have a, contract with someone a couple of years ago to help write some grants, and I think this came up more even with the waterfront project. So we had put this in as a placeholder, that if it's going to be something that happens with the waterfront project, it probably needs to come out of that particular fund. But, you know, for other grants, if we want to contract with, it would come out of the
My understanding was it was a placeholder, knowing that we're gonna apply for the hazard mitigation grant that's due in October, having the help from WK Dixon or whoever we select. We've had conversations with them, but it was funds to help with that process and whatever other grants throughout the years that we might need.
So that's great, I'm really glad that's in there. I think my question is, so we did have a grant writer as of last year, right? She was paid, she wasn't salaried, but she was paid per hour, I believe, but she was certified. And as we were running grants for the waterfront, she didn't quite have the experience for those grants, and so we sort of pivoted and had WK Dixon write the grant for us, and that was very successful. Obviously, we got pushed to the hazard mitigation grant program with staff's help, Sam, and Rachel helped with that, so that was a huge win for us. So with that being said, could this grant writer money be used in the same way if it's not a specific grant writer, go to whether it's WK Dixon or another firm, or do you all envision hiring another person to fill this role?
Well, this is not for a permanent full-time position. This would be still on a contractual basis. Whether it's WK Dixon or whether it's some individual person that has expertise in grant writing.
I would think at this point, WK Dixon we would continue on with them, for writing the hazard mitigation grant, since we were successful with the grant with them.
Right, and it could be a firm as well.
Yeah.
It's just.
Okay. Okay.
We don't have a current contract with any grant writer at this point. They helped us bridge the gap with the BRIC grant. But we don't have a contract. Just.
I like the fact that you're looking at someone who's qualified to write those grants that we're seeking to gain, that has that knowledge within that arena.
You have to carefully balance out the specific grant objective and the knowledge of that person in that field. It might be naive to think that you could have any one person who could be successful in different venues as you have proven, sir. on your situation. It still costs money, and $50,000 might be a fair number, but I think the point that you're not looking at anyone necessarily looking at one particular person, I think you're probably, you are.
I think you're on the right track.
There's also the option of performance-based, that a lot of firms will take the grant on with an identity to perform and then get compensation, so they oftentimes will put the grant together in advance and seek it, and I think as Commissioner Oliver indicated, if you're really good in that particular lane, for example, USDA funding, firehouse funding, rolling apparatus, you can find a grant writer that would try to help you get something in that line, and it's usually 5% of the award, sometimes 7 to 10% of the award, just depends on how successful they are and good at what they do. So there's ultimate options, but this is a space where we give you some flexibility to say, hey, we feel like we have a strong chance here. This is the grant we'd like to apply for as the board in support of it, and then you would have that resource expert at your disposal.
And don't forget that no small part of our youth is the success in gambling.
I was gonna ask a question regarding your abilities and whether or not that you may be utilizing someone else to help write grants or write grants themselves.
Whenever possible, try to do that. Okay. And then there's a chance that you can also partner with those other firms. So when you need that data pull, you need that graphic pictorial image, just having access to that, the ability, you might have the ability to mow a lawn, but you get to a point that sometimes it might be beneficial to pay that third party to mow it, and then you move on to the bigger project. And so we would balance all of that over the course of the next 12 months. But this, I think, is just simply, we needed help, and we had access to it. I appreciate the compliment, but I think that be a victim of your own success.
Obligation.
A victim of your own
You
success.
probably, you quiet, you know that.
Everyone's working, isn't it?
I look forward to it. Any other questions on the grant writer? The Boys and Girls Commission, I think this mayor would be glad to speak.
Yeah, I'll be more than happy to feel that. Well, many of us attended the groundbreaking ceremony for the new Boys and Girls Club, and we know that they're going to be moving. But I did want to share a story with you that happened about 2.5 years ago. Congressman Murphy's office had reached out to me, one of his aides. They received a letter from a young lady who lives across the street from Randolph Johnson's park. And she was writing to the congressman about how, as a teenager, she doesn't have a whole lot to do in Lincoln. And although we do have park and rec activities that are for the smaller kids, what really resonated with me with the New Boys Girls Club is that they're trying to capture that age group by providing them with activities that we as a town are not able to. Whether they're going to do podcasting, virtual reality, the things that are within their wheelhouse that they're interested in. Now, know that they have money to do the building, but they're going to fall short of some kind of funding along the way. As a town, looking at us holistically, when you look at a budget, you look at how the budget is spent and how the town values their people. And I think we're going to be missing an opportunity if they don't seem to help out in some way, an organization that's going to capture that group that's at risk. They're calling for help. They're asking us for help. I felt bad that she didn't have the confidence to even come to us instead of coming to a congressman. I did walk over to the house because the address was there. Rachel, we were having a park event and we had some pizza. So I took the pizza over to the house and knocked on the door, and unfortunately she wasn't home at that time. Nobody was. I made a second trip. These people are never home. And there was nobody home at the time either. But if we can support an organization that's going to capture that group and make that effort to do so, whether it's $75,000 or even if the board considers it to be a little bit less, I would like for you guys to probably consider some form of donation to that organization. They serve up to 18 years of age. Most people don't realize that. And when you get into high school, we don't want to look at our teenagers as just workforce ready people. We want to be able to support their future, get the job. And that's why I kind of asked the board to consider a donation to the Boys and Girls Club.
Mayor Harper, can I ask, would this be a donation for the construction of the new facility, or would it just be a general, whatever they need?
It wouldn't be for the construction, I believe they have that on lock, they've got enough donations to get everything up and running. But this would be for whatever it is that they need. We could definitely have a conversation as to where that would go, have them come back down and take a look at those needs specifically. But truly to be able to enhance that teenage experience, the whole club in itself, but the group that seems to be crying out for help is those that are 14 and up. So you've got to capture that group of individuals before they get lost. And if we could be part of that success story, that would be great. I've answered your question.
I have no issue with that, man, but I think they say in terms of the construction, that it was still a little short money wise, so if we give them 75, I would like for it to be earmarked. Specifically, not for construction, but for the other things that they would be wanting to provide the youth in this area. And it's most important that we do support that, because we make sure that they're out there doing good and not out there giving the chief more headaches than he needs. So we get the Boys and Girls Club to provide them with. I would not.
I don't have it. My donation wasn't to go towards construction at all. I believe that they're doing a lot of capital campaigning to make that happen. And to be honest, I didn't hear that they were calling for the money to construct it. There were a few things that they weren't able to get, maybe the awning over the basketball court at this point in time, but as far as being able to be shovel ready and open the doors, unless you understand, unless anybody has any further information that I'm not aware of.
I'm a big supporter of Boys and Girls Club.
That's why I'm looking at you.
Part of the problem that we have a very strong fiduciary responsibility to all of our citizens across this state. And we sometimes have to look at what the role of government is. And I think that although I'm totally in favor and subscribe to the Boys and Girls and to the Y and the other thing that's going on in this community, I'm a little cautious of using what I would say governmental style taxes for what I'm gonna miscast as social improvement. Because I wonder that if that shouldn't be the responsibility, the philanthropic responsibility of our community. Now, having said that, I'm not making a decision.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not in any way approaching, today's not the day we're gonna make decisions.
No.
We have a long ways to go before we have to make some of these decisions. But I just raised that as a caution to us, on a fiduciary responsibility, as to whether if we tax individuals, whether we should particularly direct that towards, at a town level, towards social services. And I'm not even trying to say that Boys and Girls are social services, I'm just saying that whole theater. I would also add that this community, in my opinion, especially for its size, is extraordinary philanthropic nature. We're blessed. We've seen that whether it was in hospice or a number of things that we did as a community. So it's not any opinion from me, it's just an observation.
Good to receive. Also too, I just want to say that there could be a partnership there. We do
Yes.
not have space available to house all those activities that we are going to now call social activities, which is also part of the health of your community.
Correct. And Parks and Rec
and-
gets into that, and the school system
And
gets
they would
into
need
that.
funding in order to get into that as well. I mean, if they were not going to be using the building, as we were told, we have an opportunity to hold functions there.
Right.
But it's not going to be free. to
It
have.
shouldn't be.
Right, and you're gonna have to have some cost to that, so if you don't, let's say, call it a donation per se, but set aside money to be able to utilize the building and to provide funding and offset their costs of letting us utilize that, that would be
Deep collaboration.
deep collaboration.
Deep collaboration. And that's the only balance that I think we're forced to, in our own time, in our own space, to reach.
And that would allow for them to actually have some funding in order to keep those programs alive, but it also allows for us to use that building and resources for our citizens as well.
I'll give that answer.
Oh, did he have a question?
Well, I was just looking at it in terms of listening to what,
You like to put that?
I commented that earlier.
No comment.
What Commissioner Oliver was talking about, and it's true, and I wouldn't even think in terms of citizens, they want to be taking their money and put it to, boys and girls.
I mean, you have the statutory authority to make appropriations to nonprofits. There's no question about that. The wisdom of whether to do that, I will leave to the board. Of course, you have an expectation setting function with other nonprofits out there as well. But I think that's probably where Commissioner Oliver's heading. But there's, at the end of the day, no authority issue. We can appropriate to a nonprofit as we deem fit.
I was gonna comment, thanks for bringing this to us, Mayor Harper, and thanks for the discussion. I think that this is an opportune time for us to make, some sort of donation to Boys and Girls Club because we do have the construction of the new facility coming soon. So it's an exciting time. There's a lot of, awareness of the Boys and Girls Club right now. They're gonna be merging, and I think this would be a time for the town to show that we are investing in our community and our kids, and that, you know, this is important to us. I have a small child, and he is likely going to grow up and he will need, you know, things like this in the community. So I think of him and I think of the other kids, in our town. And I think we should consider this as a town being leader, so I would definitely support, for the donation, especially at this time.
Only one mayor at the table.
Yeah.
You know, the Boys and Girls Club does great work in the community, and we have plenty of amazing nonprofits in our community that do wonderful work. And the expansion of the Boys and Girls Club is a testament to the fact that they are you know, an important part of the community, and they're a needed group. But I do feel like we do have to have that fiduciary responsibility with taxpayer money. We do have amazing donors in our community and philanthropists in our community, and the town should put its full weight behind this and ways of advertising or letting the community know that this is an opportunity to step up and become part of it, and make donations to Boys and Girls. But maybe the awareness is also something that the town kind of step into. But I do feel, you know, as we've gone through this and we've had the conversations throughout the couple of years that I've been on board, is being careful of setting that precedent with nonprofit organizations and nations. It is difficult. It's something where this connections or take with that club and utilize the space maybe, and you know, could be a way of doing that, or maybe if there's a way of you know, town staff or public works, you know, maybe pitching in and doing some work and so forth, but utilizing taxpayer dollars just for a pure donation when we don't know what it's going to, I have a hard time. So, but yeah, I wish them luck, and I do feel like that this is a time when the town can step up and really help you achieve for that organization.
It's a good conversation to have. I want to thank you for the open conversation about even discussing it and recognizing the importance that the club will be providing. So it's a a good step of conversation to have, so just figured I'd put it in. Any further conversations on that? We can go on, you know.
In dredging, we have a space order for $100,000, and if there's questions on dredging, there's a couple of us. that's
What,
watching.
where? Do you have any update on when dredging is going to occur?
We're working on it, so Kyle has been actively engaging multiple options, and we were gonna invest in a two-person canoe and 2 shovels, we're gonna make it happen.
There you go.
But you have a more sincere update. You share it with.
We had an opportunity that came up that we thought we could try a side cap dredge that was going to be a boat inlet. So we immediately made a request, only to find out that we did not have an environmental permit to do so. And so we are now going with another option, we're looking to see if we can contract with another dredge. So, made some progress, it's a jigsaw puzzle that we're putting together, but Mayor, we hope to have it dredged for the next millennium.
Okay, all right.
So,
We'll keep you absolutely up to speed. I want to thank Kyle, he jumped right on, and we tried to pull some favors and call.
So with contracting with another dredge, are we able to still use the, Army Corps of Engineers permits to do that? Or is that?
my understanding is that's a conversation they had with you, and
Yes.
yes, ma'am, with you, Mr. Murchison. That still holds true. What we were also trying to do is get them to give us what the estimate is on the cubic yards of sand that would need to be moved. And we're hoping that they would at least do that for us, so if we go to a third party, that they at least know that what the expectation
They being,
is. A third party. It's a little different process as well, Mayor, where the town has to front all of it in that case, and then the state would reimburse you it. So that's,
two-thirds,
no, sir, 50/50.
50, on that.
That was that 50/50, nothing in 75.
That is not 75/25. Yes, sir. It's 75/25 with the federal, but it's 50/50. If we go to a third party.
75 if it's core.
Yes. That was part of that legislation that went through last year.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, sir.
The next 2 large ticket items, I want to point out, we had made some adjustments on our quick sheet, and we'll point out on our detailed sheet if we go to it line by line. So the capital reserve funds for roads was earlier at 200, we adjusted it to 275, so I'll make sure when you get in your multi-page sheet that we show it's at 275. Then the capital reserve for boardwalks and docks is at 200,000. Any questions on either of those items?
Talk about it a little later, but I think we start getting into the boardwalk and docks. And we'll speak to it when we talk to Jim. Drive that toward it as possible.
You had to come up with $200,000, boardwalk dock number. If there's specific items that need to be replaced, that's out of the same stuff.
And so it's fair to say that there's a lot of moving targets into that whole conversation, and the 200,000 is a round space order. The needs are gonna exceed or outpace that money, but this is just an initial space.
Historically, what's that number been?
Initially, when the capital reserve fund was created, it was 600,000, I believe.
For the docks, for the boardwalk project.
The money has been spent already.
Not all of it, there's still some in the project.
It was my suggestion just to contribute to that again and put a space holder in, just the unknown and not knowing what we're gonna face in the upcoming fiscal year, just to contribute again.
Further questions on those two topics? Right. Utility fund it is.
So utility fund, we can start to go through one by one, but are there any questions if you've had this list for utilities as to what their needs are, the regulatory compliance, just keeping pace? Are there any issues here that stand out to you? The area of question.
There's WER test. Can you elaborate on that, somebody?
Stuff we talked about with Rivers Drive and
The I-9?
That's the, it has to do with the permit. Yeah, regulatory, so that's gonna be a requirement. One of the things we can do to, looking forward to the next meeting, so they're bringing in new requirements for the permit, and this is one step.
you said sewer lift station generator 4. Does that mean lift station number 4, or does that mean you're buying 4 generators?
On the topic of lift stations, what about lift station number 7? That we replace.
So, currently we have almost $1 million in a fund specifically for that project. We're going into the OCCP grant, which is, we could get up to $750,000, but the construction estimate came in more, but we're gonna need more, so the resolution we'll talk about a little later. That would be a loan through DEQ for the remainder, so we haven't put any money in the budget for that, so that would be.
There's a project fund already set up for
Yes.
that.
But it's gonna be short. You're looking at debt and short. So it's-
Debt, the amount we're short, is that what you said?
Yeah.
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 Yes, so we are applying for $2 million for the loan, if not knowing if we'll receive the grant. If we receive the grant, we can adjust the loan amount
Correct.
based on what we would actually need, and also taking into account what was already set aside in the fund.
Does SCADA ever stop?
Someone's thinking.
That was a.
I know what it is.
It was a
Does it ever
pretty-
stop?
I would like it not to stop. That was-
Gonna see it next year. Next year's year 3 is.
I just spoke.
This is positive.
Yeah.
Questions on the utility fund as an enterprise to be self-sustaining?
Rock establishing stormwater.
So you established that fund last year in the budget, and we're looking at the snapshot sheet, just, the difference in the budget from last year and this year. The large difference is because of the, grant. There was the Lassie grant,
Right.
so that's why, the $180,000 that's, suggested for the budget is just based on the stormwater fees that you approved last year.
It's receiving in those fees and spending them in accordance with for maintenance.
Yes.
Can we go back to what was taken for Commissioner Officer?
Sure, on
We're
the
looking at-
UDO.
Yes, okay.
Yes, so about $60,000, we would anticipate to be rollover, unspent, budgeted, but not completed. I wouldn't always say that, but for this current.
So does that mean we need 90, or does that mean we're gonna spend 210?
It means we're gonna spend 150.
150 minus the rollover?
We won't roll over any of the money. Any that's left will just go to fund balance in the current year. And then,
Unless we designate it, commission designated, we can roll it over.
yes, if you wanna roll it over, then
Gotta speak up.
we can drop the 150 down.
which is just, it's paper, I agree with you. Same money, just when you get it. I agree with you.
Okay, anything other on this piece of paper that anybody would like to review before we move on to the budget overview? So we'll be having continuous conversation, so of course.
So
Won't be
the
last time.
multiple page document, if Chris doesn't mind, we'll tag team if there's any deeper questions that come up, but this is a little bit more granular. It includes some line item selection and gives you a bit more language narrative as to what the items would be. So on the keynote, we talked about the cost of living allowance with the CPI rate of 3% margin. Local government, there's been changes to the retirement system, which are birth above you, and you just have to comply with. And then in health insurance, there's a spaceholder at 15%.
When will we get that?
So our health insurance renews in January, so we usually get those numbers about September. Usually around September for the numbers, because open enrollment begins in October, and then the new rates are effective in January.
When the new rates become effective in January.
Yes, sir.
So we're really looking at a potential price increase for half the year.
Correct, and that's how I've budgeted it.
We'll talk later about that, I hear you. I understand what you've done.
So I do have some intel in that arena that you may want to be aware of, that the North Carolina League of Municipalities had funded a pool similar to the state pool that we're a part of. The League of Municipalities had to dismantle the pool this year, which is a shell shock to all the communities across the state that were a part of the league's health insurance. Someone that is foreshadowing should anticipate the stability of the state plan as well. And that fortunately, we're in the state plan, but there are a lot of lives changing, a lot of ages changing, and then the sustainability of a large pool usually extends the small pools a little bit further. So without saying that the sky is falling, I do want to share with you, we have an exceptional healthcare plan here. We're a part of one of the most efficient and stable plans in the state, but you should take note that the North Carolina League of Municipalities did have to disband their health insurance pool effective July 1. Sent notice to their insured base with a 4-month lead time to get to the market to try to secure health insurance. That's a disturbing set of circumstances.
And the town is part of the.
We're a part of the
state
state plan.
That state.
Yeah, now the provider, the third-party vendor has changed, because that has moved around. But the state being one of the 10,000 lives insured, which occurred 5 or 6, 7 years ago, now it's fast how time flies. But when the state opened that portal, and Beaufort jumped in, and the town of Benson's across the state jumped in, that was a really good move for those municipalities. And has proven to be such. It's a more stable rate over time, larger the pool. The ups and downs have been a lot more predictable. The fact that you have to account for a number of this nature, the state plan had traditionally had less than 5% fluctuation year over year. So we need to be thinking long-term strategy, and be as healthy as possible and provide protection for our staff. In the event on future budgets, that may be changing. The pool, they have to collect enough revenue to stay solvent. And it got to a tipping point for the league where they couldn't collect enough revenue, and it was a loss leader for the insurer. It was an unmistakable problem. So, any questions on health insurance? The potential for the case study implementation is item number 4 in the keynotes. The positions as discussed are under number 5. And this is what would be considered a balanced budget at 33 cents, which no fund balance would be appropriated or recommended by staff. And keynote number 7 is that merit increases have been included in the budget for performance. Any questions on the keynotes 1 through 7?
So with the merit increase, with this new study, that's gonna go away?
No.
No, okay. Just wanted to, probably get this back, because I think it's probably.
So depending on when I do the deeper dive and we come back with final recommendation on the salary study, there would be market analysis adjustments for a certain segment of our population, and then there's still merit-based opportunities that would exist, correct? Wording it. It doesn't go. So you still want to be that high achiever, making all those grants and allowing all that money to flow in. So yeah, the high achiever,
They would also like to just have one job.
that's it. Or 2 or 3.
Well, you know, that's
We,
good.
we would reduce it to 3 hats.
Okay.
Any other questions on keynotes 1 to 7? Do a line by line deeper dive in the general fund, beginning with the governing body. If you're not all excited, you should be. Sounds like an election potentially this year. So, the proposed budget would encompass the costs associated with holding the local portion of the election. Obviously, in non-election years, that number is 0. Election years, currently have a space holder.
Does that go to the county?
Board of Elections requires a certain dollar amount for each municipality. Administration increases salary and benefits due to contractual obligations. Any questions on the admin? HR, high note and change in HR. This brings us back to that IT question. It's currently contracted services would continue as are with ACS for their upcoming.
Do we have a goal set with ACS for any particular, any town needs, like digitizing the data, backing up the additional data that might be offside, or anything in particular that we're looking to do in the town?
I would ask, Elizabeth can expand a little bit greater on the current contractual and the level of service engagement that would be with ACS.
I wouldn't say that we have any, goal setting for that. We do have cloud-based storage for files. We have a server that is backed up every day. Employee computers, things like that. As far as the service, Christy and I have talked with Stefan about what we were looking to see after our IT director left. More on-site presence, as I mentioned, live streaming the meetings from the Board of Commissioners side. Christy, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I would just say, I do feel like Stefan stays on top, or ACS stays on top of the security aspects, because they do bring to us from time to time suggestions and any costs that are involved with those. They've been pretty nominal, nothing extravagant that, they may suggest we add another piece of security just for protection, either with email or server, that sort of thing. So,
Yeah, and we
That's an additional cost too. That's not included in their ID costs.
no, but they haven't been really large costs. I mean, some of them are based
They're not
on.
included in the IT costs.
They're included in this budget, but right, if he brings something new, then we have to look and see can we have that.
And I will say in the last 2 months, we have increased the security on the email side of it. We increased that package a little bit, which is included in this budget. That's just per town email. The cost associated with that.
And getting that, as far as, is there opportunity for digitizing this paper data that we don't have?
There's not a software program, like I think, Laserfish maybe is one that we've looked at in the past. But we do use the network for some files. I know, Barbara used one of the interns to see how to digitize all of our employee records last year. And of course, all the board stuff, minutes and agendas are already captured, so.
To my knowledge, there's no issues with storage, the amount of storage we have to scan those items in. Like Christy said, all of the minutes and all of those documents have been digitized, that I've done that, but we kind of leave that up to each department head to do that on their, they do that themselves. Barbara has digitized the HR records and.
So as far as old paper records, the town does not have many old paper records.
Well, some things we're required to keep hard copies of, such as the minutes. There's finance documents that we have to keep hard copies of, HR documents. It just depends on what the specific document is.
Can I help with that question potentially? Unpack it a little bit, so there should be the retention schedule that's approved and the maintenance of that and compliance with the retention schedule. There are third-party vendors if we have extensive historical documentation, anything that we would want to do a digitized process on. And having done that with, historical documentation back to the inception or historical documentation back to a particular period of time, cemetery records, planning and zoning, items of documentation so that it would be easily retrieved. There's digitizing and then there's the retrievable action associated with digitizing. Clear word search, documentation burden. So when you try to pull it, there's different levels, but I understand the question. Give us some more.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I just want to make sure our
Great
local
question.
community, working pros, we don't want to look back and say, we should have digitized this and ask the question. Under the assumption, understanding that we did have some documentation that we did. That is priority for the town.
And I'll add that all of the board minutes are archived at the state record. So I do that every year.
Yeah, I think it's more historical.
So this is all that we're asking the contractor to do for us.
Not all the, very little of what they discussed is by ACS. ACS is really security, backup,
Providing storage.
and routine maintenance.
Yes.
And no software or hardware is covered.
So the town's email, Microsoft email package is included in that cost. Other than that, we pay for the additional cost. We pay for any kind of computer upgrades or equipment.
Any hardware.
Yes.
But to John's point, can we kind of get an update on where we are with digitizing documents and or that schedule that you're speaking about?
On my IT notes, I listed cybersecurity, associated ACS costs, and historical documentation.
No. Any further questions about contract services with ACS? Thank you.
And just for the record, Stefan and his group are extraordinarily strong. And I have reviewed them some, and finding good people, especially locally, that are strong as they are, I think the town has done a good decision. He's been exceptional.
We'll move on to finance.
I would ask Christie, she'd love that.
Sure, there's a $12,300 increase. A large part of that is because we are having to go through a forced migration. We're not quite sure which company yet, but the attendance software program that we use is going to not be supported. And so we did this about 3 years ago, and we've been discussing with them ways to either a new software program use or even looking at other vendors. But that was the first time that we had digitized time cards, and it has been great. We don't want to go back to paper version, but I imagine there is going to be some sort of cost. I mean, we're hoping for it to be more around like the $5,000 range, but the reality is we're not seeing that. It seems like everything's.
Is it centralized or is it in each department? How do you do it?
It's a web-based program, the one that we have now. Employees are able to send from a laptop, a desktop. They also can have the app on the phone. It has location, should you need to check their location. So it seems we don't have physical time clocks in any of the facilities, but we are able to approve everything electronically and then upload it into Edmunds.
And from Barbara's standpoint, it's compliant.
So the employee can also make changes to their W-2s, get that type of information, or what is that platform?
Not through the timekeeping system, but through what we call ESS, which is through Edmunds Solid Financial. We don't allow them to make changes because there are a lot of places that changes need to happen, so we prefer them to notify us so we can make them in all the right places, but they are able to retrieve documents on there.
And big Chronos, whatever you do.
Yeah, which one?
Chronos. We had them at the hospital and they were hacked. And we were not paid for at least 3 months. So that was really interesting. Well, they kept paying us the last paycheck that you were earning. But if you were on vacation and had a low paycheck that week or, bi-weekly, that's what you're gonna be getting. And then they had to somehow track what you were actually doing, which would have been more or less. It was a hot mess. Yeah. No comments on that.
Just from memory, Chrissy, is our contract with First Triumph?
I believe this is the last year of it.
Okay.
Moving on to parking, if there's no further questions for Christie.
Parking showing the current and proposed, obviously this is an impact based on start time of parking. We made some minor changes with pivot, and an email went to the board and requested some data from you, so we think that that's helpful. If you need anything else, looks like, paid parking is scheduled to kick off again on the 5th of May as expected.
Yeah, that's the, allowing us to enter our vehicles and be involved. Yeah, that's, I don't know what we get that back.
Well, I hope it's helpful to you. You do have on your schedule, second item on your agenda tonight, we will be discussing golf cart spaces, looking for input. Anything else here at this point? The PD, I think we've covered a majority of that, which was the generator and then the potential for the undercover car. Any other issues or questions on PD?
So if this budget is approved at the amount that they're requesting, they should be able to go out and find a generator.
Not sure about that, so we'll come back, and if there's additional changes that would need to be made to the draft budget, if we find that that number is substantially different. So we're working on trying to get it secured. Fire department's list is a little bit lengthy, chief had to step out, he said it's at his meeting with the county tonight, so I'll do my very best to answer any questions, and if it's something that's outside of my purview, we have staff who can bring back to you. So just moving down the list, you can see under building maintenance, where the notable costs are, what would be the payment, repair, replace, including security lights, cameras, any questions on line item in 1510?
So far, no.
And then non-capital, you can see what the adjustments would be, the self-contained brief apparatuses and the air compressors are the same, station 2, substantial costs there, fire continues to back there.
Matt, may I just add that note there, that the SCBA for Station 2 would be funded out of county reserves, so there would be offsetting revenue for that.
So,
Moving at 7430, the replacement of that 1-ton truck with a 3/4 truck, 3/4 ton, lesser expensive truck identified at 75,000. The planning department would like to identify that it was a typographical error. They consider themselves remarkable. No change in plan. Need to continue forward with the UDO updates and all that they're working toward to do. Applaud them for their digitization process, trying to streamline the planning and permitting process, but at the same time, trying to keep areas of hope that identified. No major change outside of UDO. Public services admin, again, no remarkable increases there.
They are too remarkable. Okay, very good.
Public Works in 7420. That's the conversation about the forklift. There were 3 prices here on the forklift, all at a municipal price points. I believe the unit in the lead front, if I'm not mistaken, approximately 77,000. That's the Toyota brand awareness. So I'm trying to find the best deal, but the space holder still at the 90,000. We want to find the best bid at the best. Could be a little bit less than the budget. Right. Any questions on public works of 7421? And then in vehicles, if you go to 7430 for public works, you'll see, it includes the F-150 and the F-350 roll up at a cost of $110,000. And then if you continue down, the next, the 7440 line item is again the dock replacement that we talked about a little bit.
We've had multiple on that, or just.
At this point, I don't believe we're still in singular, we're looking for alternative options, materials costs. And you can see no changes in sanitation, additional just the CPI for the GFL contract for collection. And stormwater is identified as the 180 in and the expenses associated with appropriate improvements. The outlier that we have there is if the stormwater monies are coming in with the county, we'll have to have a conversation about how to invest those dollars. That's an important option for us. Where we invest those dollars and how we invest those dollars is a conversation that come before the board before any decision. Because there are options that I understand, specifically on Meeting Street, you make investments there to do improvements. But then again, you want to be cautious of, are we setting precedent? Do we have access to properties, our easement agreements and positions? So that's a longer conversation for legal and I. If you have the chance where there's a communal HOA that oversees that area, it's much easier to set one conversation and get 100 individual parcel accesses for both temporary and future access to maintain clean. So not to get too long-winded, but the stormwater gift is a gift. We want to take the gift and figure out how to best reinvest that to protect the most amount of people without creating an issue. And staff will come back with a recommendation. Facilities and grounds, no changing. Continuing over. So for non-departmental, in the 700, 200 line item, you'll see the proposed budget includes 4 firefighters, and it has parks and recreation event coordinator, and benefits for these positions, plus the pay plan is actually 113, not 133. Apologize. It'll be 113. But again, we'll do the deeper dive on the total allocation for the years of service study, and we'll come back to the final.
Why wouldn't the firefighters be in the 531?
They, once we receive some direction from the board, they will be, but it's a lot easier to put it in one department versus dispersing everything between wages and all the benefits.
When you give us the line item, would you put it in the square base? Please. I hate sweat spots.
Yeah, it's just, we need some direction of either, yes, we would like to, or no.
When you get it, line item, that's good.
So if I could ask, I'll ask that, is there any objection to the proposed position? Because I understand exactly the commissioner's question.
Finish this and then respond.
Because I understand your question that if it's in fire, it should be in fire, so I completely.
And Matt, I would add, we would do the same thing with the pay plan. We would allocate that money appropriately per department.
Tied in by department.
By department.
I don't want to have to do it twice either, but, to get the effect, we'll talk about it after we finish this, get the line items.
And then in the 750, 600 line item, the space holder for the Boys and Girls Club, and then the contribution to Cherry Point are all held there. The transfers to capital projects, the next line item shows the current budget and the proposed. I want to point out that the proposed would actually be at 475, which would be 275,000 to streets and 200 to the water.
Yep, sorry about that. I did update that county insurance.
I want to go ahead with your question.
I'm not seeing a 2100 contribution to airport. Where is it at?
On the
it wasn't called out under the what will it fund, that was funded last year. And there was, I mean, you can certainly pull it back out, it just was not a notable thing listed under what will, or under the what will it fund one sheet, page sheet we looked at.
It was
So you
not
could-
a large new cost, it was more of a reoccurrence, so the question is, would you like to, and what's it go to?
For this sheet is for you.
New and larger amounts.
When we do a lot of that.
600. 100.
If you have.
So we donated that, or we gave the contribution to charity from last year.
Yes, we went.
For clarity purposes, this was the list that I had asked for. This makes sense to me, the new person coming in. If we're going to deviate or do anything in addition, these are questions that I would be asking as a manager of staff. What's new and high level priority? And let's just put it to you at a glance so you can see it. Because I think traditionally you're used to working through this level of detail, but for me, I would like to see it one grade above. If it's a big ticket item, how did we get here? Was there any other questions on that Cherry Point?
Okay.
And then in transfers, it was 275 to streets and 200 to waterfront space holders. And then jumping into the water and sewer utility fund, you can see each of the items, the majority of this is already covered on the overview page. The two newer positions, one will be on sewer, one will be on water, that would include that individual salary adjustment. That's the 800, 200.
So what are these people doing?
Additional employee, same as the other ones. We talked about before, we have 4 employees in water and 3 in sewer.
Yeah.
So
Something that,
we're getting to that point, we need more.
On the sewer side of us, contract services, you're showing a proposed budget of $402,300. That includes the testing that we've identified, the clarifier repair and stuff. Sewer is so exciting, we carry it over to the next page. You'll see in the 7420 line item for sewer and utilities, front end loader, the 4 generators, and then the wastewater treatment plants, 25 horsepower plant. Moving to the 48, 10, 74, 30 line for vehicles is the singular pickup truck at an estimated cost of $52,000. And then contract services line below at 7440. The continuously ongoing SCADA. And then in water, obviously, remarkable increases in that's straight back full circle to stormwater at $180,000. If it's okay, we'd like to bring up this pictorial image, which is going to be the small and large cups of coffee on the top. And we want to show you examples of where we are with the current tax value, the proposed revenue neutral rate, and what an impact would be on the draft rate of 43 cents. This is assuming that current calculation of 1.97 billion. So the best example that we have is trying to find a 25th percentile, a median, and then set it up a percentile. So we're still working through those numbers. The county was very helpful. They sent a full data set. And it took me a little bit longer than today to work through the data set. So what we have are rounded figures here. So an estimated home, and we have practical examples, even within our own structure, our own building of both a property owner who had been valued rated 200,000 prior to the reval, and then currently is now valued at 300. So If you had a $200,000 home that saw that appreciation to 300,000, and you had a 46 cent, which is our current tax rate, the Beaufort local portion of their tax bill would have been $920 for all this is received by the town. That would be the neutral rate if it was 30.8 cents, almost right on the money by $4 at $924. So that would be, all intents and purposes, in the rounding world, a near perfect estimate. If you went to a 33 cent tax rate, the homeowner that used to pay $920 would be asked to pay $990. That's $70, or roughly $5.88 per month, so $70 annual, which is about that one coffee stop rate. So the taxes, if you set the tax rate on a revalued property that's currently sitting at 300,000, that owner would pay $990 per year.
Based on a $300,000 reval this year.
That's correct.
So are you all saying that people whose homes were valued at 200,000 previously, most of them are now valued at 300,000, or you just took the 25?
You can't use the term most, and I appreciate that. I want to be real clear, I don't want to mislead anybody. There'll be a $200,000 house that's now valued at 272. There'll be a $200,000 house that went for 325. It's all geospatial based on location, proximity to water, square footage, cleanliness. So these are just example numbers, and we know that there's a percentile here that we're working through. So you'll actually get a more defined figure, but for the point of this conversation, if that happens, this is the impact. So if you had a $400,000 house, so if you pull the median home value, whether you look at Zillow, you look at the census, the median home value on paper prior to the reval fluctuated between 395,000 and 430. So our median home value is really close to 400 before, and we're working to see what the median home value will be on the new data set, assuming a data point close to 600,000, because they show that we saw an on average increase, a mid-side, max side. And so we know that there's a particular property that was valued at 130,000 within the county, close to 127, and jumped to 530. Those are the outliers. Then there was, even in our county presentation, there was a commercial property in Beaufort, less than 150,000, and that commercial property jumped to 810. So there's going to be that, those data points are going to be all over the place. But if you use the litmus test of the $400,000 house, that person would have paid $1,840 this year. If that house jumps to 600,000 and you lower it to the revenue neutral, that homeowner would be paying $1,848, which is hence again trying to figure out how to neutralize the impact. But if we set the tax rate at 33 cents, a $600,000 property would be asked to pay $1,980 in tax per year. And again, then when you start to get to the upper portions, you're going to see that with the teeter-totter, that if you had a home that had been previously valued sub-million, so let's say it was 800,000, that data is usually jumping to right around 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, depending on where they're falling. If you had an $800,000 house that's now valued at 1.3 million, your taxes at the revenue neutral rate would actually be a little bit higher than you previously paid. It'd be rated $4,004 on a $1.3 million value property. And then if you set the tax rate, excuse me, 33 cents, you'll see it goes up by $286 a year. So this helps you when you're trying to figure out the impact to our residents' property. Is the pictorial helpful at all? Because you're going to have conversations, usually in the produce aisle, when you're trying to pick out something fresh or stuff, or somebody's gassing you. They tend not to catch you in the dairy, it's almost always produce. I don't know if it's because it's early in there, you're lingering around, but that's usually what happens. When you're at the post office, things like that. So this is the imagery that if you're a small, medium, large property holder, it usually gets a good impact.
This is very helpful. Thank you for putting this together. Oh.
Yeah. Actually, it's more.
So did you say you all, we might be getting a slightly updated version of this?
If I can figure out how to write the formula, take out the 6,500 identified pieces and the 1, 2, 3s that were individually randomly dropped in a Excel spreadsheet, item line number 8. The county was so kind of sent me the whole kit and caboodle, and I was maximizing the computing power of my new terminal, which I think is great, but I'm getting there.
Well, this is very helpful, so thank you again, and I look forward to seeing an updated version.
It may move a little bit, but my goal is to try to find you the actual targeted 25th percentile on the previous tax rules, where that 25th fell here, where the 75th was, where it falls here, because that'll give us a better grade statistically of the anomaly over the bell curve.
Do you remember again as to what grade you that went around and did these?
What was the name of the firm this time? I don't recall that.
Virtual, no, got it.
We can find that.
Yeah, we got it. All those people are contracting person. And it's interesting, in my opinion, having met with a couple of, they're all Carteret County local people employed here by the firm that the county chose. It was, as you know, it was the second time that the county went through all that.
This firm does this type of evaluation throughout the state, or is it just depending upon the hires? that we do?
Mostly North Carolina, is what they told me. And I will give them credit, they've been absolutely responded. I have an appointment tomorrow morning for another firm. They've been very respondent, they give you an answer, they look at it, they've been very objective, and they've been very willing to listen to reason.
So, but did I understand you and giving some facts to, Matt earlier before the meeting started? The number of homes that total Carteret,
62,000,
and then the number of,
about 1,400.
valid,
Last week,
valid,
last week, they had met with about 1,400.
14. No, my neighbor, one of them.
A lot of meetings. So with all of this going about, I guess we're still, this is gonna be one of, I think, most challenging budget seasons, because we don't really have real data. Because things are beginning to change. People are gonna be doing, I don't know when they do their appeal process, is what they're calling it, if that will actually change anything, or if it will stay the same. It's kind of hard to put a number in place. So we're doing our SWAG, are we? Based on-
So, yeah, having done these quite a few times, what you'll see is the longest statutory periods up to that 8-year revow. Multiple communities will select different kinds and select different frequencies, whether it's 36 months, 48 months. But we're on a traditional 4-year term. So I'd asked the question of the county, and the answer that new county manager Griffin provided was that they are currently slated for another 4 years, which would put it at 2020.
They missed their 4-year, and they had to skip, this is actually the 5th year. And I don't know whether they've made a decision at the board level as to when they'll do it again.
The intel that we have is potentially 2029, but if that's always subject to change based on if the board.
So there's a vote of the board.
That's right. And so wanted to share that with you, that, yes, ma'am, this is a difficult one to do. I think it's committee policy, you don't want to set your rate too low, that if you set your rate too low and your collections are low, then you miss the mark, and you don't want to go too high. But you should account for some change in the predicted value versus where it will actually settle out. And then once it settles out, hopefully it's a 3 to 4 year cycle, that number would stay relative to us, and then we would know. It's a little bit, 12 months from today should be an easier target.
We have passed a budget before then, though.
And everyone is in the
That's the
same,
problem, we have to set a budget on moving target.
Right.
but I'm fully confident that we have the capabilities.
You said this is just the Beaufort, tax.
The county has set their rate.
So just when we're talking to people in the grocery store, remembering this is, even though we're not increasing, we're not doing anything with the county taxes, people will still see that on the bill.
So again, the county's gonna have the same formula, so the county,
Depending what they decide.
yeah, they had a pre-reval rate, and then they have to figure out what the revenue neutral is and what they wanna propose. In theory, one would assume the actual percentage will come down, but whether it's revenue neutral, higher or lower, is up to the county. We don't have any good intel on it.
It's the same conversation all municipalities are having.
Every municipality, the county's having, we're all.
Alrighty, look forward to having more conversations, but so this is just an overview, we're gonna be doing a deep dive, also having public input as well.
And I'd like to speak to that one.
Sure.
One of my weaknesses, I like numbers. So I've kind of put together some thoughts and hopefully some suggestions. And I'm trying to be as specific as I can for Matt and his staff, with the specific requests that I'll give you a copy of this, Christie, when I'm done. But looking back, no small part of the rationale for the approval of 2 PUDs in Beaufort a decade and a half ago was the need for increased property taxes and utility revenues. These 2 PUDs now represent at least 15% of Beaufort's property value. This percentage will maturely grow, and a 3rd PUD is now under consideration, under construction. I think perhaps the time comes for Beaufort to harness some of this property tax and utility revenues. For example, the Water Sewer Enterprise Fund alone from fiscal year 2018 through fiscal year 23-24 accumulated $5.3 million revenue greater than expenses after debt service and the transfer of $2.7 million to the general fund for administrative costs. First, I feel we must examine each expense line item, line by line, to gain confidence in its need. Second, I believe we will find it is time to reduce sewer fees to competitive rates. Third, we need to predict our FY 24-25 and future debt service payments year by year. And finally, we need to predict our revenue year by year. Property and sales taxes make up 60% of our general fund revenues. As concerns the ad valorem property tax, account 10-30140, I suggest we start with an assumption of a fiscal year 24-25 revenue neutral property tax rate with a 98% collection rate, but reserving 2% of the May 20th, 2025 Beaufort property tax value, fearing there will be more shrinkage as values are either appealed or collected. Before we discuss what can be funded, your list, in fiscal year 25-26, I request the following items. A report of our average per user 3,500 gallon per month sewer fees in comparison to other similarly sized communities. And there's a website that I've referenced in here that shows it. Secondly, a copy of the line by line general and enterprise funds fiscal year 23-24 revised and the recommended fiscal 24-25 budgets as provided in prior years. Christie, that's the one that you have given us. Pro forma of expected debt payments over the next 5 years. A pro forma of expected property and sales tax revenues over the next 5 years. An update of our unrestricted balances. A listing of unfunded capital projects known at this time. And lastly, establishing a budgeting, dock enterprise, and capital accounts, as these are not governmental type activities. I think if we have that group of deliverables, hopefully before, I think our first meeting is May the 12th.
Yes, sir.
Which is a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks from now, then I think we as a board have got the data that we need to be able to make the decisions on what the staff recommends to include in our budget, because we'll have all the expenses line by line, and we'll have the best possible revenue estimates to have, and then we can answer the question that you want us to ask today. But I don't think until we have that data, that we can do that.
You know, share that with the folks, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm about to, yeah, you said.
And I had a very good meeting with Matt, which you noted on your prior schedule. We talked a lot, and he encouraged me to be very specific what the financial plan I had as far as financial goal. How do you want to see detail, history of it? Each my documents show.
It says for 24, 25, we're referring to the goals for the upcoming 25, 26 budget, correct?
Yes, thank you.
Just making sure. So that would be a comparison then.
Good gap, good gap.
That predict our future.
Yeah.
I think that what you shared with me in our meeting last week was right on target. I think we can provide all of that. We'll gladly get to, well, our goal is to have.
I know it puts a burden on Chrissy, because to a certain extent, it's larger just to buy it in general and then do it at once. I think I've got to look at the details and the revenue in order to deal with it, to see if it fits. I want to do everything that we all want to do. I want to do it based on best possible data we can have.
We thank you for today, because what we wanted to make sure that there wasn't any red flag issues. No, that's a concern. Let's that will wait. So just being able to have the roundtable conversation, both literally and figuratively, I think is important.
This is a broader conversation of a deeper issue that we're gonna be getting into knee deep, so. Thank you once again for preparing what you did do and giving us some visual examples and somewhat giving us some ideas of what could be coming ahead. And like Commissioner Oliver said, we're gonna do the best that we can, get all the information and make the best decision. It's been a very interesting year with this reevaluation and not having a whole lot of knowns. So having to prepare for the future as best that we can with the information that we have. Now, unless there's any further questions about the budget overview, Matt, do you have anything else that you wish to add? That's got a copy of the financial goals. Thank you. Yeah. You need some new computer.
I need a new laptop. The new laptop.
Also to understand, to add on about the amount of money that will be carried over next year and what our anticipated surplus will be, and recommendations for what the surplus or the reserve fund should be, based on other similar appropriate agreements. So I think we're gonna have to decide that as our surplus increases, we want to match, or do we want to have a 100% reserve, or do we want to have 50% reserve, what do we want to lay in?
Is that per just general fund or like enterprise funds? We have just surpluses in any area specific, because we do have
Oh, I'm sorry, unrestricted, some of
unrestricted.
the unrestricted.
Which is all on this.
Very good.
So in advance of today's conversation, we were pulling some of that data. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that approximately $1.2 million carried forward a year ago. And then there's a little north of $7 million in your unrestricted fund balance as of today. We would want to do your calculations and discuss that the state's minimum is 8%, that the industry, the thumb is roughly 25%, and then in coastal communities, substantially higher than 25% because due to the threat of that event singularly taking us out completely if needed. So we're glad to have that, and we can give that as an updated. We may do some of these pieces in electronic form so you get them earlier as well.
Oh, please do this.
Yeah, we don't want to bombard you.
At least one weekend before.
And that's why I really need a new working computer, the one I have now presently is not. I mean, I'm missing out when things are sent out and Elizabeth and Barrett, sometimes I'm having to either get a paper copy.
We can tell you, sir, with clear direction that we will resolve that immediately.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing it attention.
You guys voted.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
You guys voted.
I didn't see a line item for commissioner, which was.
Rules of the trade.
Talking at a computer, yeah, this is a little.
Because each meeting, I'm trying to pull things up and I can't pull it up on the present computer that I have, even the one I have. I'm gonna throw that in the trash.
Well, they gotta get back to the town.
No, I'm talking about my personal,
Okay.
my personal.
All right.
The town one here. It doesn't allow me to sit here on a board meeting to, pull up things. It'll have email stuff before January, nothing recent. That prevents me a lot of time from being heard with what we're discussing.
Definitely take a look.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
And just one more addition to this, I didn't have a chance to really review Commissioner Oliver's detailed list, and thank you once again. When we're talking about rates, I'd like to have a really good comprehensive conversation about that, because we are looking at getting to the point growth is going to be pushing that envelope as to how much sewer we can allocate. And when you start talking about decreasing the rates, I want to know what the future is going to hold for that sewer system. If we're going to have to expand, when will the trigger be? We're reducing the rates at this point in time, be constructive, it would be nice to have it. But if we're looking at having to expand that facility, where we are, where are we at when that comes to that? Because I would hate to expand the facility and have an increased rate. If we can expand and increase, facility and keep the rate pretty much the same, then that would be great. But if we can reduce the rate and still have expansion, that would be even great too. I mean, there's a lot of ups and downs with that, but.
Unfortunately, as you and I have discussed from time to time, our problem is not sewer capacity, our problem is I&M,
Then there's a,
the dead stop.
well, until that's proven, which I don't have a whole lot of data on, I think we just need to look at it holistically. All right, so we're fine with leaving the FY 2026 budget overview? Okay. So we're gonna move on to the 2025 parking season, the golf cart spaces, custom surveys, customer service. Who's gonna take it?
I'm too new to help you with this.
Oh, yeah.
You'll not hear that from me very often, but I'm too new to help you with this.
Well, who will help me with this?
Start.
Oh, right.
First of all, just a couple things. I know we talked about this at the retreat, and I think it's come up once before, but I had a note to provide you with the quote for the signs, and that number is about $2,100. It's 11 new signs, and they're updating 42 existing signs, so they'll have larger QR codes and also correcting the dates of the season, and they have formatted them so that should there be any date changes in the future, they'll be able to just, reskin that one part. They're able to do a lot of that skinning, they call it reskinning in-house, where they're just gonna be putting the graphics on it, so. That was just for informational purposes. Another item that had come up when we were talking about parking, was the share space, and that's where they could put 2 golf cart parking spaces within one space. And so the question was, how many of those spaces should be converted? We've been on a thread with several of the Pivot staff, and they've recommended 3 on the north and 3 on the south side, but not within the premium lots. That would allow for 12 carts to park at one time. They also noted that they did not record any time last year when there were more than 12 carts that were parking at one time. So they felt like the 3 spaces, that was their recommendation. So staffs does need the board's, does need action from the board, whether you would agree with having those 6 spaces converted, or I don't know if we want to do this item by item or just everything at one time. Okay.
One motion.
So that would be, one thing about the share space. The other thing was the customer survey that had come up, during their presentation. So the question is, would the board like to move forward with the survey? And if so, they asked that you would select some questions to be asked. They noted that, responses are usually best if it can be a yes or a no, or a 1, 2, or 3, so nothing that has to have any kind of a text response. And they proposed the 3 questions here. Do you find parking easily accessible when you visited Beaufort? How would you rate the texting payment option, and how likely are you to return to Beaufort for a visit? The surveys would be sent to the cell phone numbers that were used in the text to park system. There is a fee to the survey of 5 cents. So the 2 items that we need direction on are the share space and the survey.
Okay.
That 5 cents, that's what the town will pay for that,
If you would
for
like.
each customer that responds to.
I don't believe that it's on a response, it's if it's sent.
Yes.
So we don't know that they're gonna respond, but if they send it.
So they send out X number, that's 5 cents.
Yes, sir, regardless of whether there's a
The
response.
response or not.
And what do we estimate that total cost to be based on last year?
I think when we last discussed it, it was just over $2,000.
Yeah, I don't.
But I don't have an exact number. I
And
apologize.
that's 5 cents to pivot.
Very right, apologies.
The concern that I have with it is what would we do with that data? We're really going to use that data specifically to change anything. You know,
We'll make the sun brighter.
what's the goal?
Can you read the first question again? Sorry, I don't have that in front of me. From the recommendations that, did you find parking easily accessible when you visited Beaufort?
And it's a yes or no answer.
On that question, accessible to me
Yeah.
connotes something different. I would ask, did you find parking available? Just because accessible means something different.
But if you parked, then you did find it available.
Yeah, exactly.
If you didn't find it available, you gotta go somewhere else. So
It's a,
So coming back to the question, what are the questions and how do we use them?
what was the second question?
The second one was, how would you rate the texting payment option?
Now that one might be different because maybe you found it really hard or you found it really easy. So you
The
would
one,
get,
the one you want to know about though was the ones that didn't use the texting because they didn't like it or didn't know how to do it or were aged or old like me. So the ones that did it, probably see it's all right because they used it and got away with it.
yeah, I mean, we might get some more valuable information
Yeah.
on that one. We might see what percentage of people think it's really hard to use it.
then what do we do with the information? I find it very hard to use.
I can-
Well,
Welcome to everybody.
welcome to my-
And it's this way across the country. It's nothing any different anywhere you go.
We learned how to use it. We learned it,
Yeah,
and everyone's different.
everyone's different. You have to adjust to the environment and, people are doing it. It's-
That last question, will you return to Beaufort?
How likely are you to return to Beaufort?
Most people want to return.
Yeah.
Why we're so busy.
Everybody knows what it is.
It's not really an issue.
Not for, we're gonna get inundated with survey left and right, and, you know, I'm excited to provide them. So,
I'm not against the survey per se, I actually agree, I'm not sure what we would do with the information from these specific questions. And I haven't come up with my own good question.
Now, somebody has found a way of communicating to Pivot, because I have seen some comments, and they were actually good comments. They were very thankful for the parking ambassador, I don't know if that's what we're calling him now, for their help. Somehow I received some of that information, some shape, form, or fashion, so somebody's making that effort if they want to. But, you know, if you ask loaded questions, if you get all these loaded answers, what are you gonna do with them? And for $2,000.
But I do think we've made the right call with, you know, identifying the problem, hearing from them, and then trying to implement solutions to those problems. We were proactive with people who weren't able to maybe use that text to park, and maybe have the ability to contact the local ambassadors to come and help them. And I think that's going to help us solve the problem.
And to that extent, frankly, the best recommendation you get is probably from Pivot. Let's have another one of those sessions and say, what do you recommend for revenue? What do you recommend for cost saving? What do you recommend? What are your ambassadors telling you that they're hearing good and bad? I would think they should very easily be able to, that should be valid information.
But the alternative to the text part is kiosks. The kiosks were $5,000 and $6,000 a piece.
Right.
They deteriorate within a few years, and so I'm not sure what other options we really have that are cost effective and keep it in moving. Everyone has the technology. Well, pretty much, most people have the technology.
So they question, those questions or one of the surveys, should that be something that the town want to know, or should it be something that they need to know in order to provide a much better service? Versus trying to get the answers whether or not.
Really, I think Pivot knows the answer. Experience, they're in multiple markets. And they've done a good job for it. I don't have a problem with Pivot. They help us. They can help us with suggestions to make it better for our community.
Just based on the consensus, would you like to just not have the customer survey at this point in time?
I think you have that consensus.
Okay.
Nodding heads.
So that's a no on that first action. So we have another action that's in here that you would like us to discuss, and that's creating 3 spots for 2 golf carts.
So it'd be a total of, the recommendation is a total of 6 spots, 3 on the north and 3 on the south. So it would allow 12 carts to park. They would dot,
Okay, that's
They cut in half.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Do they do that, or does Mark have to do that?
Yeah, who does that? Oh,
we'll
look at mine.
probably contact them to paint them. There's no probably, they will.
And you'll put a little sign of golf cart there, so then, okay.
2 of them.
2 of them, well, 1 for each slot. Visuals are important.
I think that makes sense based on my, I hadn't had any problem
Or
squeezing into.
your golf cart's not taking up full spots either. Which is
So,
always
Mark,
frustrating when you see that and there's no spot for your car.
We would have to get signs made up more.
So we have a template.
They're temporary. Thank you.
Put that right on the pavement, yeah. So let me clarify this, are we taking a spot that you could fit a car in and cutting that in half?
Yes.
So you're reducing parking. For
Well, we're
vehicles.
actually adding parking, well, because a lot of times when you go downtown, you see a golf cart parked in a car spot and you can't park there. But if they're sharing spots, they may be leaving more open. Now that's if only, if they continue only having 12 at the most at one time. All right. Because then instead of taking 12 spots, they're only taking 6 spots.
So,
If they don't, but are they still allowed to park in a regular car spot?
See, there you go.
What we decide.
'Cause
I
they're still
would
gonna do it.
say yes, as long as they're paying.
So there's a problem there.
So how are they paying for half the spot? They're paying for
Well,
the.
so it'd be really nice if the ambassador saw the golf carts coming and said, hey, did you know there's a golf cart spot here? Why don't you park in this instead of a regular spot?
I'm sure that'll be part of the educational piece this year.
And they can direct them to those places. But they're not paying, they would still, they have to pay by plate, so they would still be paying, each
Right.
part would be paying per
Okay.
spot.
Oh, okay, that.
Mark, I think you have a new job.
on our education, you're referring to placing something in our town newsletter in the bill where they could see that golf cart, what we looking out for.
Yes, we'll have information on the parking season, the 2025 parking season. It'll be on our website, and of course, the ambassadors will be out interacting with the public and notifying them.
And it's,
Maybe has a question.
If we have an active database for the email of each of the registered golf cart owners, then we can do a direct email that shows the update, and then we can get pictures, photos, and post direct to the constituent.
Look at the new guy. He just coming in with it. That's a good suggestion.
and I assume it's not the first time Pivot has done something like this. Assuming they've done something.
Yes, ma'am. They actually recommended the shared spaces.
The potential for increase of revenue, but it's also then trying to maximize your parking. You can split it 6-1, 1/2 dozen the other, it becomes tough the other way, because a golf cart can always park in a car spot, but then a car can't park in a newly split golf cart spot, so it's worth a shot, it's worth a try.
Okay.
And we'll try hard to communicate that message on all.
So we have a consensus that this is the direction we'd like to go in.
Good.
Okay. 6 spaces. 6 spaces, doesn't add, double the money.
And I know communities in Florida, that they utilize regular parking places and makes it a little bit larger, but still use staggered parking for golf carts. And then that can then be used for vehicles, or if one golf cart takes up that spot, there's still an opportunity for double. And I think as time goes on, if this becomes successful, you may want to look at implementing some of that. In the community as well. If we see more and more golf carts on the roads.
Now, the suggestion of sending emails out to golf carts that are registered, that's something that can be easily done. It's gonna be done by us or by Pivot.
I can answer, if we have an email list, then we just do a push.
Chief,
Use the word please, it might work.
Chief,
Golf cart. There's not a database right now, but that is the project that the summer camp is working on, so maybe something that they come up with, and it's certainly something we could generate, because we do get that information on the registration.
I can be easy, call the number on the registration form and say, hey, what's a good email, so we can make a database that we send out information.
Okay.
We can do that, yes, ma'am.
I think that's a great idea,
This
because I think even safety, concerns can be addressed, I think you see, underage drivers sometimes driving golf cart without that supervision. Golf carts parking on sidewalks and golf carts in areas that definitely frustrates, people in the community, so I think, education would be helpful in that area.
I have a recent question that I apologize if it's not the appropriate time, but it's about golf carts. So I had a golf cart rental company ask if there would be a consideration for reduction of rental fee. And I would share back to you that if a resident is paying $100, that it should be appropriate for the commercial to pay the same registration fee to gain all the same services. So my immediate response was, I'll gladly ask the board, but I would recommend that it stays all status quo. Are you comfortable with that decision? That a
Say
rental,
that again?
so if I own 20 or 30 golf,
Oh.
I should pay for every golf cart I'm registering. I shouldn't get a discount because I'm a for-profit golf cart company.
Oh,
Jason,
no.
so Jason's been down to see you.
Had a great conversation. But I said that I would ask, my initial take would be, if you're a renter, would you pay? I agree.
All right, then you have another conversation, good information. All right, so where are we at with your requests? This one here.
I think those are the only two.
That was the only two?
So I think,
Okay, but the quote for the signs, that's something that we need to discuss in another meeting or no?
no, ma'am, that was really just for informational purposes. There's already money. I think the original quote we got was like $6,000. So they trimmed that. That was their estimate, and they trimmed that back quite a bit. So it's just gonna be the $2,100 to update. And the new signs are not actually, my understanding is they're not 11 new signs. A lot of the signs will be double-sided now. So depending on which direction you're coming, you see the information.
Oh, that's good. Started out with that. All righty. Any further questions about the 25 parking season? Golf course spaces, customer sign. Now we're gonna move on to IPS, the FB invoice. I'm assuming that's gonna be Charlie.
That's me.
There we go.
One last time, what you have before you is an invoice from IPS, FB, now at $14,815. The backdrop on this is, you as a board, authorized the notice to proceed, notice of intent on the project, and IPS, was notified on March 5th of that intent. At that point, a couple of weeks later, the ownership of IPS FB was trying to do, I think, in the private sector law, that we do not do. We need contractual documents to cover out-of-pocket expenses and need to go through a process. That did not happen. Ultimately, IPS FB withdrew that. Then on April the 10th, they presented their proposal, which we brought to the board, and you addressed that in a closed session. And the ultimate offshoot of all of that was that on April 15th, had a conversation with IPS FB that we were ceasing the project with them. It was a mutual conversation. And then a day or two later, we were presented with the invoice from IPS FB for work performed to date, which included travel, staff time, and conversations with particularly state regulatory agencies on our behalf. What we end up with is a product that itemizes the components of the system, the specifications for the tanks and such. Jeff and I have had conversations with another contractor and inquired about the desirability to purchase drawings, and we're told that was not necessary. So we're not here asking you to do anything other than consider the invoice that's presented for your review and action. I'll refer to town attorney and town manager, if they want to supplement. And they have to answer any questions.
Okay. Harry, do you have anything to add, or would you like to hear from the board first?
I'd like to hear from first.
All right. Anybody have any questions about this particular invoice?
I'm in favor of paying.
I'll wait for Melvin to be seated. We were talking about the. Have any questions for Charlie?
Charlie, were there any discussions beforehand, about what the cost of the work was going to be? Did we reach out and ask them for proposal for this type of?
The project took off pretty quick because of our limited timelines and such. And when Mr. Weaver finally got around to saying he needed draw some funds, that's when internally we began to talk about, well, we need a contract. And so, and from there, finally, Mr. Weaver just said, fine, you know, I'll give you what I have, and that's what happened on the 10th of April, and, you know, here we go. So, you know, it was, you know, the cost estimate in there, was just way out from where any of us thought we were. So, you know, we're trying to move forward, but the short answer is, once Mr. Weaver started to talk, I would have expected these services to be folded into the ultimate bid. So I think that's where we had gone, but since we ceased, since we ceased the project, he presented an itemized invoice of what his expenses were today. You know, we can beat those around, counter offer, we could go any number of directions, but there was not a contractual document on the front end that itemized these expenses. And, you know, it would have been difficult at best to have done that because of the nature of the project and our lack of information and our lack of guidance and direction, other than we want 24,000 gallons of diesel fuel on it from annually, or 26. You know, that was kind of the marching orders at that point. So, you know, did I drop some balls in there trying to get things moving? Probably. But, you know, we are where we are today.
Yeah, and I'm saying I've been a lot of work and hard work on your part to do this. I was just going back and having the bill after the fact. And typically, usually like to see the estimates beforehand and then pay it, you know, and then the board authorizes the payment for that beforehand. And my concern too with looking at a bill like this too is just the pure me excess of, you know, 2 site visits and hotel travel. There's just parts of this that I just are jaw dropped for what's being charged. So, you know, in retrospect, obviously it could have been done differently. The concern going forward in the future is that, you know, if the committee has expenditures that we want to get bids beforehand, have a proposal brought to the board, so the board can approve. So that's my comment.
Any further comments about this? All right, you want us to take a vote on this now? Okay. All right, unless there's any further questions, what is the pleasure of the board when it comes down to the IPSFP invoice?
But can I comment?
Sure.
Is there opportunity to negotiate?
In this world, there's always opportunity to negotiate. I don't know what, I guess we need to develop some negotiation points. What is it we want to do? Is there a particular line item or is it just the bottom line? Kind of lost there where we go.
Matt, do you have something to add?
Yes, ma'am, if it's okay, Mr. Well, I had a conversation with them today. I would recommend we pay the invoice as presented. I don't anticipate there would be much in the terms of negotiation. It would fall to a different form of mediation. I would recommend we pay it.
All right, so I'm still looking for a motion when it comes to this invoice.
I make a motion to approve the invoice as long as the payment is full and final.
Fine, very good. Got a motion on the floor. Any further questions? All in favor, say aye. All opposed, have the same right. Now we're gonna move.
I agree.
I just shot noted to the finance officer tomorrow. The check is full and final payment. So this will be it.
Okay.
And I presume, we have the necessary corporate entity identification, W-9, and blah, 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 blah. Yes, ma'am.
We're gonna move on to number 4, the Boca waterfront consultation with Carly Burgess.
That last one, you might not want to.
Sell yourself, come on. I'm not quite sure who's going to present this or not. Would you like me to do, or who might?
I'm comfortable with taking on number 4. So,
Okay.
multiple members of the board had asked if Charlie would be willing and able to remain engaged to assist us as needed going forward, specific with the Beaufort waterfront conversation. He has not only offered to do so, but do so at a $0 per hour volunteer base rate. And after having conversations with both he, the mayor, and I, we feel it's at the very minimum, we should compensate Charlie at the IRS rate for his travel for anything he does. So if he has travel to and from, then we should at least compensate him for that. So I would tell you I'm comfortable in drafted volunteer agreement. It was also brought up, if he is secured as a volunteer, that we would have liability and protection professional coverage. And so this formalized agreement would protect both Mr. Burgess and the town while he graciously offers his time and attention.
Any questions about the contract?
None other than, appreciate the 0-0. I give you your mileage.
Kind of like your new computer.
That's right.
I hope you get that.
Deadline, we want that like before the next meeting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Welcome. Keep you up to date. All right. No worries. Okay, so when it comes down to this contract, I guess the board will need to approve the agreement as well as provide, Matt the, ability to execute this agreement. Can I get a motion to that?
I'll make a motion that, we approve the item of discussion in terms of, the Burgess, doing the consultant and monitoring it, and IRS rates, or whatever factors need to be in to ensure the, protection of the town and Mr. Burgess.
Right, and for Matt Zapp to actually execute the contract. Got a motion on the floor, any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed have the same right. Okay, now we're gonna move on to the pump number 7 resolution. So as I indicated in the very beginning, on April the 14th, we had approved the resolution for that. However, the state has updated some of the language. And Matt, do we want to go ahead and explain what that update is, or whomever you would like to
I
appoint?
believe that the state is now requiring me to be a C4, so with your permission, I will execute as we previously with the minor amendments to be.
Any questions about that? Seems pretty straightforward. So we'll go ahead and adopt this new amended resolution. So I motion for that. Have a motion on the floor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, all opposed have the same right. So we have staff comments. Anybody, pipe up. Just real casual, it's just us.
We have an update from Tony. He's at the county meeting, so the county fire EMS commission approved the budget recommendation for the county commission from our level.
Very good. So it's that $530,000 proposal.
No, that is for the fire district tax rate. That's what we discussed an hour ago to the county commissioners,
Okay.
approved by their lower authority.
Anything else? Anybody's birthday today?
Actually, my brother's birthday.
Okay, happy birthday to Sarah's birthday.
And my grandmother, but she is passed.
Okay, sorry to hear.
Um,
No staff comment.
The only comment that I'll make is that Assistant Manager Lewis, myself, and the mayor will be attending the North Carolina League of Municipalities City Vision as representatives for the town, and that we have an extremely critical election forward-coming in this week. The mayor may be selected as our representative for the region for the league, which I think would be great kudos to her and us. So we're hopeful that if that news comes through, we're gonna have a press release ready to go in advance. But we're gonna go rally the troops. So if if you wanna come work the polls with us, we'll be in Greenville, rounding the Hartford for the leagues.
That's right, it's very hard. I'm running on a pose, I think you can.
I didn't want to drop. Oh, good, in all sincerity, congrats. Navigate, and I think our conversation was having a seat at the table keeps you off the menu, so I think being there, is very important, critical for our development.
Are you not there?
I'm not going to pass.
And Tobin and I attended the Main Street.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm through with traffic right now.
Yeah.
That Board Street, that just will be out.
Well, say it was, I did attend it last year and it was a very good learning
Yeah, it
experience
was.
for me, so I have to attend.
Being in Greenville is a little bit easier to get to,
True
but it's all good. All right, let's know.
Yeah,
Oh, I can be in.
well, we actually put on.
Oh, okay.
But it was asked me this morning, and I didn't know the answer to what was asked of me. And that was our ordinance in terms of there's construction just up the street here. Gentleman has concreted his front yard.
Yes.
Currently is supposed to be, is 50-50. And I think he has exceeded that. In that order. And I know we have, do we not have a new ordinance? Person?
We've got some helpful information here.
It is not 50-50 in that area.
No, are you saying he's exceeded?
No, sir.
He has not?
He has not, because there is not a 50-50 requirement.
In that zoning district.
In that zoning district, he has not exceeded, that's right.
And I knew he was outside of the historic district.
He's mixed use.
He is Cedar Street, mixed use, which actually encourages, but that is his parking area, because that lot is teeny tiny. And
It is
there's an
small.
easement to get to the house behind him, so that's where he has to park in front of his house.
All right, I will relay that information.
Please just, there is some, he has put in some nice trees and landscaping.
We put some
down the
palms on
side.
there, yes,
Yeah.
very nice.
He put some landscaping. So it's-
I've gone under the, I know I heard that he was planning on putting some homes, but there was some concern about that whole area being concrete.
Yes, sir. He's fine.
I'll let him know.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye. Thank you very much. You're still late. Yeah, I saw that.